I want you to notice
I
something.
want to believe that God
Works in mysterious ways.
I don't know why God would require us to have blind faith or unjustified belief for one of the most important questions in our entire existence. I
Because
don't
that's
know
a leap
why.
of faith.
We should be able to get to God via rational means and evidence.
It is not.
Yeah,
It's
you're
not,
wanting
it's
to
not
know the mind of
unjustified.
God. It's not for us to know.
I wanted you to notice that every response given in that video was a thought-terminating cliche, and these are super important to be able to identify and understand because they are used to abuse and manipulate people all the time. Thought-terminating cliches are used to stop critical thinking so you don't feel the conflict of cognitive dissonance.
I'm going to be completely transparent here. I don't really have an argument against what she's saying because I understand that she is in a position where she doesn't have faith as we Christians do. My anger is more towards the response of the Christian involved in this. I'm so tired of Christians just using these cliches, and they truly are. Well, God works in mysterious ways. And what that implies to the unbeliever is that there is no evidence for what we believe. Is the faith of Christianity without evidence? Over and over again in the Old Testament, whenever the nation of Israel is faced with some overwhelming obstacle that they feel they simply cannot get over, that they're going to be utterly annihilated, God assured them over and over and over again in those circumstances. Over and over again, you'll read, remember the days in Egypt, whenever I freed you from the Egyptians. Remember when you were enslaved. You felt like you would never be freed. And he says, I brought you out of Egypt. Remember the miracles, crossing the Red Sea, feeding you daily for 40 years with manna from heaven, this coriander-like seed. Remember those miracles. But the atheists today, they would say, well, why not do it today and show us? That was the evidence for them. God doesn't have to part the Red Sea every other weekend. He did it once. And the same kind of faith that is required of us today was required of the Old Testament nation of Israel as well. Remember whenever I did these miracles. The very same I am telling to you Christians. Observe the Gospel of John. You know Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in the New Testament. Observe the Gospel of John, which ends the Gospel accounts. The very same eyewitness, in essence, John, who was an eyewitness to Christ's miracles, to Jesus turning water into wine, miraculously feeding thousands with just a handful of food, walking on water, healing the blind, deaf, lame, etc. John wrote why he documented all those things. John 20:30 tells us, and many other signs truly did Jesus in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written, Jesus walking on water, water into wine, the resurrection. These are written that ye might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing ye might have life through his name. John was an actual eyewitness to Christ on the cross, and he wrote this, but one of the soldiers with a spear pierced his side, and forthwith came there out blood and water. And he that saw it bare record. He's speaking of himself in the third person. John does this throughout the Gospel of John. And he that saw it bare record, and his record is true. And he knoweth that he saith true, that ye might believe. One of the very final verses of his Gospel, John 21:24. This is the disciple which testifieth of these things and wrote these things, and we know that his testimony is true. He says, I'm telling you the truth about these matters. In the Old Testament, we so clearly read, remember his marvelous works that he hath done, his wonders, and the judgments of his mouth. And in the New Testament, book of Revelation, Jesus tells the church at Sardis, remember therefore how thou hast received and heard, and hold fast and repent. Remember, just as the old nation of Israel had to be reminded over and over again about we have proof, we know, we have faith that God has performed wonderful miracles. He doesn't have to do it every weekend for us. Just as they were told, remember when you were enslaved in Egypt and I brought you out and you crossed the Red Sea on dry ground. And now I tell you Christians, remember how Jesus would raise the dead and how he did miracle after miracle after miracle and how the eyewitnesses can be counted on. We have evidence-based faith. It doesn't have to happen every other day for us. We have faith that these things that are told to us are true. We have evidence-based faith, Christians.